An Indian man claimed that an ice formation inside his refrigerator was a form of Lord Shiva, then used the attention to collect food offerings from local believers. The story began when the man accidentally spilled a lot of water inside his freezer. But when he opened the freezer the next morning, he found a tall, cone-shaped piece of ice. The shape reminded him of a Shiva lingam, a symbol linked to Lord Shiva. Instead of removing the ice, the man began telling neighbors that Lord Shiva had appeared inside his refrigerator. News quickly spread through the community. Some residents came to see the ice for themselves. Because the weather was extremely hot, several people believed the cold ice could be a sign that Lord Shiva was going to bring cooler weather. Soon, people were praying in front of the open refrigerator. The man told visitors that anyone who truly respected Lord Shiva should bring fruit, sweets, milk, and cooked food as offerings. He asked them to place everything inside the fridge. The next morning, all the food was gone. The man claimed Lord Shiva had accepted the offerings and was pleased with their faith. However, as the offerings continued to vanish, residents also noticed that the man appeared to be gaining weight every day. What do you think?
That man's a scam artist, man. He knew what he was doing. All right. But, first and foremost, I want to give all the praises, honor, and the glory to Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, Bahashim, Rachaha Kotash, and double honors to my apostles, the elders, the teachers of Great Millstone. And shalom to you, sincere brothers, and shalom as well to you, few sisters. All right. Now, as you heard and you saw here, all right, this is a video that I, came across a few days ago, and I was, I was laughing my ass off, man. This shit was funny as hell, because ultimately, even even amongst these heathen nations, they don't really believe, all right, in the gods in which they worship in, man. Okay, because as you clearly saw here, and also there's an account in the book of Bel and the Dragon in the Apocrypha, all right, which Lord willing, we're gonna read here, showing you, all right, that the same thing that this man just did right here, the heathen nations have been doing that for years and years, man. Okay, you see, going all the way back, all right, thousands of years ago. Okay, and this is why the Lord Yahweh Shai made a separation between the children of Israel, and he gave us laws such as in commandments, all right, instructions, okay, on how to live in the earth, dietary laws, all right, law of the land, etc. Okay, but the most important is to worship the Lord Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh that made the heavens and the earth, okay, and not to worship idols, because the gods of these nations are idols, as the scriptures say. Okay, these people, they create, okay, a god that is, okay, a false god, and then they worship it. They feed it, and they clean it and everything. The scriptures go into that, is that, you see, so this is nothing new. Okay, this is nothing new, but ultimately this really goes to show you and how a lot of these people, they just follow whatever they're being told. They don't really have any foundation at all. Okay, you see, people like that cannot be in a position of rulership, man. Okay, or a position of power. All right, but nevertheless, these nations have had power over the children of Israel. Okay, and now we're under the Edomites. Okay, all because of our disobedience towards Yahweh Bashim Shai. Okay, but ultimately you can really see, okay, you see how inferior, all right, these nations are to as compared to the children of Israel. Okay, there's the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and so-called Native American Indian descent, man. Okay, the true biblical Israelites, that is. All right, now let's get this precept. Okay, the book of Psalms, chapter 96, verse 5, it says, "For all the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord, Yahweh, okay, made the heavens." All right, in the NLT, the gods of the other nations are mere idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Okay, and let's look up this word God. All right, it says God, rulers, judges, divine ones, angels, gods. All right, so whatever it is that these people worship, okay, are just idols. Okay, they're not the true power that made the heaven and the earth. And when you look up all of these different religions, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, all right, Confucianism, yo, that's crazy. Baha, all right, native spirituality, okay, and then there's a couple of more, I'm a Sikhism, okay, some that I can't even pronounce. These are all the different religions, different doctrines, and some believe that Whatever avenue, you take, it all leads to the same power, which is incorrect. Okay? Because the Lord gave us instructions on how to get to him. And that's through Yahweh Shai. Okay? And you must believe in Yahweh Shai in spirit and in truth. Okay? The scriptures talk about that, man. That if if you believe in the Lord Yahweh Bashim Shai, out of your belly, it's like out of your belly shall flow rivers of living waters, according to the scriptures. Okay? You see, not, these different philosophies and these different doctrines. Okay? You see, it tells you as well, all right? In the book of Isaiah chapter 34, verse 16, it says, seek ye out of the book of the Lord and read. Okay? What is the book of the Lord? The Bible, the scriptures. Okay? You see, seek ye out of the book of the Lord and read, none of these shall fail, none shall want her mate. So you can't mix, okay, the word of the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Shai, with these different philosophies. Okay, for in my mouth it hath commanded, and his spirit it hath gathered them. Okay, you see, seek ye the Lord and ye shall live, lest, okay, he break out like fire in the house of Joseph and devour it, and there shall be none to quench it in Bethel. Okay, so ultimately showing you, that the Bible is the word of the Lord, man, and that's how you get to the Heavenly Father Yahweh Bashim Yahushai through His Son. Okay, now this right here is in the book, okay, of Bel and the Dragon, all right, chapter 1, and there's only one chapter, so we'll start from the first verse, all right, showing you this is almost the same account as this individual who, he was able to see something, use it for his benefit, got people to come in, bring forth, more groceries, all right, before you knew it, this man was gaining weight, he was eating everything, okay, but he was putting it on this, false idol, all right, called, Shiva, all right, the god of these, Elamites, okay, you see, and people believed him. People believed that, whatever he was saying, all right, and that, this, idol, all right, was actually consuming these meals, which, come on, man, okay, have common sense. You see? So again, Bel and the Dragon, chapter 1, verse 1, it says, and King Astyages, all right, or Astyages, was gathered to his fathers, and Cyrus of Persia, okay, received his kingdom, all right? So this is ultimately showing you it's the same people, these, Persians, all right, going back to the Elamites, all right? And Daniel conversed with the king and was honored above all his friends. Now, the Babylonians had an idol called Bel, and there were spent upon him every day 12 great measures of fine flour, and 40 sheep, and 6 vessels of wine. Okay, so the people were bringing forth, all right, these, foods, wines, flour, all right, fruits, you name it. Okay, you see, to this idol, all right, called Bel. And the king worshipped it and went daily to adore it. Okay, and it was most likely, an idol in which they created, all right, but they give that idol more power than them, they give that, idol more power, than themselves. And here it is, they created it, man. Okay, so showing you again, the confusion behind that. Again, it says, and the king worshipped it and went daily to adore it. But Daniel worshipped his own power, Yahweh Bashim Shai. And the king said unto him, why doest not thou worship Bel? Okay, so again, showing you that there's different powers. Even when these people try to, say that, oh, we all may be worshiping different gods, but it all leads to the same God, which again, ultimately it's incorrect, because one way or another, they try to get you to follow their God. Okay? You see? Now again, verse 5, it says, who answered and said, because I may not worship idols made with hands. You see that? But the living power, Yahweh Bashim Shah, who had created the heavens and the earth and had sovereignty over all flesh, man. Okay? Then said the king unto him, thinkest thou not that Bel is a living power, seeing thou not how much he eateth and drinketh every day? Then Daniel smiled. So, Daniel's probably like, yo, this nigga's stupid, man. Okay, and said, O king, Be not deceived, for this is but clay within and brass without, and did never eat or drink anything. So again, this God, okay, was created, okay, with clay and brass. They fashioned it, all right, and then now they worship it. So the king was wroth and called for his priest and said unto them, if ye tell me not who this is that devoureth these expenses, ye shall die. But if ye can certify me that Bel devoureth them, then Daniel shall die, for he had spoken blasphemy against Bel. And Daniel said unto the king, let it be according to thy word. So Daniel was very confident, all right, that he knew the truth, okay, and he knew how to be able to prove it, okay, and that Bel was not consuming anything, okay. Bel is just it's just an object, okay, you see, that doesn't do anything. All right. Now the priest of Bel were 70. So what? 70, that's 60, and 10, that's 70. Okay. Beside their wives and children. So it was well over 100. Okay. Probably 200. Okay. 300 most likely, man. Okay. Because let's just say, there's 70 priests. Okay. Let's say each of them had one wife. That's 140. Okay. And then, they got what? 2, 3 children. Now, and again, and I'm just, estimating to the lowest amount. Most likely they have multiple wives. Okay. And most likely they had more than 5 children, because back then having children was a blessing. Okay. So you're looking at around 300 people every day. Okay. You see, we're coming into the temple, all right, devouring, okay, consuming all the foods. Now again, it says, now the priest of Bel were 70, besides their wives and children, and the king went with Daniel into the temple of Bel. So Bel's priest said, lo, we go out, but thou, O king, set on the meat and make ready the wine, and shut the door fast and seal it with thine own signet. And tomorrow, when thou comest in, if thou findest not that Bel hath eaten up all, we will suffer death. Okay? Or else Daniel that speaketh falsely against us. And they little regarded it, for under the table they had made a privy entrance, whereby they entered and continually and consumed those things. So again, these are the priests of Bel, and they, what's the word? They allowed the king to believe that Bel was actually a true god, man. Which them, the priests, they knew that Bel wasn't a true god, because they were actually the ones that were consuming all that food, man. Okay. So again, same thing as, the video in which you saw. That individual knew that ain't no goddamn, Shiva, have any power, man. Okay. And he was the one that was actually receiving all those, substance, man. Right? All the meals, he was the one that was consuming it. He knew. All right. But the people, they truly believed in whatever it is that he preached unto them, man. Okay. Now, again, it says, and they little regarded it, for under the table they had made a privy entrance, whereby they entered in continually and consumed those things. And when they were gone forth, the king set meats before Bel. Now Daniel had commanded his servants to bring ashes, and those they strewed, okay, or strewed throughout all the temple in the presence of the king alone. So they showed the king, okay, what they were going to do. Then they went out, and the king shut the door and sealed it with the king's signet, and so departed. Okay. Now in the night came the priests with their wives and children, so they were wont to do, as they were wont to do, and did eat and drink up all. Okay. And in the morning betime the king arose, and Daniel with him. And the king said, Daniel, are the seals whole? And he said, yea, O king, they be whole. And as soon as he had opened the door, the king looked upon the table, and cry with a loud voice, Great art thou, O Bel, and with thee is no deceit at all. Then laughed Daniel and held the king's that's like it, and held the king that he should not go in, and said, Behold, now the pavement, and mark well those footsteps. So like it, and mark well whose footsteps are these. And the king said, I see the footsteps of men, women, and children. And then the king was angry and took the priest with their wives and children and showed him, so like who showed him the privy door where they came in, and consumed such things as were upon the table. Therefore, the king slew them. Yo, and delivered Bel into Daniel's power, who destroyed him in his temple. And in that same place there was a great dragon which they of Babylon worship. And it goes into another one. Okay, another idol, all right, that God consumed and destroyed, man. So again, Daniel showed them, okay, that these are the same people that, have claimed that Bel, okay, is a true power. They're the same ones that are actually consuming everything. Same thing as, this individual in this video that you just saw, man. Okay, and this was a beautiful, story to, to show you, okay, that the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai is a power that made the heavens and the earth, and everything else, okay, is an idol. All right, the Lord is to be worshipped alone. All right, so with that, shalom, Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai Barakatah.